Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. Everybody and myself, we all really appreciate it. The way that this will work, we have 4 sections. We'll start off discussing application process, and then interviews, networking, and we'll finish off with the Q&A. So we'll just dive right in. This first question is for Bob. What are you looking for when you make a hiring decision?
So there's really kind of 5 general areas that we look for when we're looking at hiring a candidate. I think first and foremost, it starts with leadership. We're really a leadership-based organization, and as organizations have become more streamlined and the traditional hierarchy of an organization and middle management has kind of gotten squeezed out, you really have to have leaders throughout the organization. And so we start with really kind of measuring and trying to identify the individual's leadership skills. And then along with that comes team skills. So how do they play in the sandbox? Are they going to be able to coordinate and work with other department directors? They have the ability to work in a team, or are they more individually focused? Really, we also look for a passion for public service, and so we'll kind of look at what's in their history. Have they done volunteer work? Have they gotten involved and engaged in their professional associations? The other piece is, do they understand the community? So this kind of section is on the application process, but when we look at that, and as Marissa will probably attest to, you got to get past that first screening and evaluation process. So are they just sending me the standard application that they've sent to 10 other cities or 10 other organizations, or did they take some time in their cover letter and then later during the interview process to really understand the issues that the community are facing, and have they kind of committed to investing the time to do the research on the community itself? And then lastly would be the technical skills. So, for many of our jobs, when we start to do that evaluation, to get through that first cut, you're going to have some of the technical skills. But, as you saw, that's probably the 5th or 6th on the list. So I think we've been willing to take chances on people that maybe have a little less experience because we know they have the technical skills, but they can grow into something that they have that opportunity to grow into something even greater. So, for I think our audience today, who are young professionals, they certainly have an opportunity, assuming they present themselves well in that initial screening process, to compete with people who've been in the profession for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Great. Marissa, same question, but if you could more broadly discuss it from the perspective of all the different employers.
Yeah. And I think that, while every organization is unique and every industry is unique, there are some common components that are shared by executive searches and recruitment. So ethics and integrity would be at the top of my list. I think that, ethics, without that, really you don't have anything. I would say flexibility and also for leadership jobs, the ability to lead change, because in leadership it's all about moving people through change, helping people to be engaged in the change. So, that's important. Competency, intellect is something that employers are looking for. Enthusiasm and passion for the work. I mean, I think particularly in local government, you're so close to the customer. Every decision you're making on a day-to-day basis affects the community. So, in particular, I'd say in local government, our clients are really looking for a passion from candidates for the work. So those are some examples.
Okay, great. And then this next question is for both Bob and Stephen. What sort of experiences demonstrate a passion for public service?
Oh, sure. So I think Bob covered a little bit of this already. I think that when we're looking at a prospective employee, and when I was hiring in past positions, you want to make sure that there's some consistency between what the person is looking for employment at with past experience. So
looking for just basic alignment in terms of volunteer work, evidence of that there really is a passion for the kind of job that you're applying for. If you're looking for a position in Parks and Recreation, then it would be natural to see some background and experience in recreation events or outdoor education. So looking for that direct alignment between what a person has done in the past and what they're after in a new position.
Great. I think just to supplement that a little bit, on the professional side, I would look at their interaction with their professional associations. So I'm on the ICMA, International City Managers Association. I'm on their board. I've been on their board for a little over a year, but I got involved with them, back when I was in graduate school, and did some, look and sought for opportunities to engage with the state association. Became a member in the National Association. They have a code of ethics, which is very important, a key component of the association, and has helped to, help drive my career in terms of the areas that I look to when I, make decisions. So if they're engaged with their professional association, that's important. Participation in groups like this, emerging local government leaders, also shows me that they have an interest and passion for professional public service. And then, I would come back to their involvement in volunteer opportunities. So, when I talk about leadership in my last question, it doesn't have to just be in their work experience. If they volunteer with a community organization, or if they volunteer in their church, for example, what part of the team are they in? Have they taken a leadership role in doing certain projects? Or are they a treasurer for the organization, or do they show up, once a quarter when the event actually happens? And it's great that they do that, but that may influence the role that they end up being in the organization when they're interviewing for jobs at some point down the road.
Okay, great. Next question is for Stephen. Based on your experience with students, what are they looking for in a local government employer?
I think it varies a little bit. Some students, of course, are looking for experience. They're just starting out in their professional career track, and so experience is most important. I think in all cases, students want to do things that they're really interested in. They want to be valued. They're looking for security. They're looking for work that's truly meaningful. So those are a lot of the things that I hear from students. And I think quite often I'll hear frustration from students who are looking for a direct connection between their passion and a job. And for those students, I really try to encourage them to be patient, stay engaged, trust your heart in terms of what you're truly interested in, look for those opportunities to volunteer and be active. Networks are extremely important. All of those things eventually lead to good jobs.
Do you think that due to the recession and the status and situations from a financial perspective of local governments that more people are looking for jobs that just aren't there, and there's more frustration?
These are definitely hard times. There's no two ways about that. And actually, this is an extraordinary time for the public sector and governance at large. Things are changing and changing rapidly. So within that kind of change, I think that there's tremendous opportunity. We need people that are truly passionate about community development, about searching out ways to pursue the common good, people that are attracted to the public sector work, even though I think this is a frustrating time and a time of change and a lot of upheaval, particularly at the state and federal level. This is a great time to get involved in the public sector. So I would encourage anybody that is inclined to work in the public sector to think of it as a challenging time that's filled with opportunities.
Thank you. So we know that we need leadership skills, we need communication skills and team building skills. These are all, this is in the soft skill toolbox. So the next question is about technical skills. And it's for all three folks. What are the most valuable technical skills a candidate should have?
Well, I think it's going to depend on, the job specifically. So I think you're going to see, if you were to put side by side experience and technical skills and some of the soft skills, most employers are going to put a lot of focus on some of the soft skills. And, you alluded to this earlier. A lot of our clients, and we're seeing this on, a pretty frequent basis, are willing to take a chance on somebody who has maybe some less experience, less time in the workforce, maybe less direct technical experience, especially in leadership positions, for someone who has great leadership qualities, good management experience, and maybe lacks in some of the technical skills. But I think having certifications in your technical field really is helpful. For example, in human resources, having your SPHR certification shows that you studied for an exam, you took an exam, it's not an easy exam. So I think those are things that can really, build up your chances for moving into leadership positions. Those would be some of my thoughts.
Yeah. I think, philosophically, I've always thought that you can train technical skills. They're the easiest things to learn. You can train leadership skills, but it's a lot harder, I think, to do some of that. The other piece would be financial. So everybody, as I talked about, organizations slimming down a bit. It's not just the finance department that's responsible for the budget anymore. It's not just the department director. It's not uncommon to say, here's your project, and you've got X amount of money to make that project work. And so you have to understand some of the basics of how to spend money, how to manage money, how to plan ahead so that your project doesn't run out of money. I think that's a key component to any skill that you're going to have in the public sector.
I think it depends, of course, very much on the job. So I think what's most important is when you zero in on a profession that you're really, truly interested in, you need to do your homework about that. And informational interviews are a good way to figure out what kinds of technical skills might be particularly important to a job or a career that you're interested in. Obviously, for a position in information technology, there's very specific technical skills and experience that are going to be important. At the same time, I think all of the work that we do in the public sector, there's a great value to approaching it in a multidisciplinary way. Some of the most important skills that I think leaders need to have today are just really good, solid, critical reasoning skills, the ability to write clearly, the ability to communicate clearly, some basic social skills. Those things are going to serve you well no matter what you're doing. And the best way, again, to sort of find out what the best kind of background, knowledge, skills, and abilities are needed for a particular job, do the homework. Go out and talk to people that are successful in the field that you're interested in. Listen to them and learn from them in terms of what they think is most valuable.
I would add one other thing I think that goes kind of across all industries and all different types of public sectors. There seems to be a great deal of interest in process improvement right now, finding efficiencies. So I think there's been lots of renditions of process improvement methodologies, lean, balanced scorecard, but having had work experience and or training in process improvement seems to be of interest to a lot of our clients right now.
Okay, that's great advice.
Yeah, I was going to I would echo that. I did an interview recently with a candidate who we have a lean program at our city, and then I asked them their experience with lean, and who has started to talk about their wellness initiative. I'm like, no, it's not talking about losing weight. We're talking about, focusing on a whole area of trying to make your organization better and stronger. And it's something that, frankly, any young person nowadays has to have experience or exposure and understand what that is, because American industries and government have moved to that as a key component of their organization.
Okay, great. That's great advice. Marissa, I wanted to jump back to you. What are the most difficult skills for you to find, technical skills?
I would say managing physicians or tough recruitments, managing attorneys, managing engineers. So professions that typically are very technical, oftentimes finding leadership qualities in those professions is difficult. So, back to the mayor's comments about relating well to people, communicating well, having good interpersonal relationships. I think our most difficult recruitments are usually in the areas where it's very technical type work, and people aren't necessarily, maybe they fall into management and leadership, but they haven't necessarily been trained or born into those kinds of skills. So those are the toughest recruitments for us.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is for Bob and Marissa. What's the most common reason a candidate doesn't make the first cut, and what's the most preventable reason? This will go to Bob.
Okay. Well, it's actually, I think the easiest one, second what the mayor said, is a person's writing skills. So, if they're applying for a job in Olympia, but actually the city that's recruiting the position is Issaquah, they haven't even bothered to change the application title, who they're sending it to gets them right off the list. I mean, you'd be amazed at individuals who send these kind of just broad-based resume or cover letters and applications for positions where it just, you'll get a stack of 150 applications, and if they can't even take the time to read what they've written or, provided some focus to the job and the community in which you're applying, it's really easy just to put them on the no list. So what I really need from people, what I look for, is a reason for them to end up on the yes list or even the maybe list, which is great when we kind of do our screening of candidates. Okay.
Yeah, because the first cut's going to be on paper, so your materials are where you're going to usually, not make it past that first cut. So a resume is something that, at every level we see mistakes. It doesn't matter if you're applying for your first job or you're applying for a management job, you'd be again surprised at what you see on people's resumes. So, and I think the average look or, time period of a look at a resume for employers is like 11 seconds.
Yeah.
So, if you can imagine, employers are getting hundreds of resumes, and if your resume is not, clear, concise, no more than 2 pages, these are just some basic things, but, proofread it. Make sure that your resume is in chronological order, that you show your dates of employment, how long, from when to when have you worked, and specifically what jobs have you held. So putting things in bullet points so it's easy for, I think as a recruiter we spend more time, but sometimes it's a minute or two looking at people's resumes in first glance. For jobs we're receiving 400, 500 resumes. So, and we kind of cast a wide net, so I think I tend to probably interview more people than maybe an employer might. But that paper first impression is really, you can't stress how important that is.
Great, thank you. Again, this question is for the both of you. What else can you tell us about what happens behind the scenes in the hiring process?
Why don't you take that one first?
Well, for us, there's a lot that happens on the front end of a hiring process. So a lot of time goes into really defining, what our client's looking for in the successful candidate. Really honing in on kind of the key things that they're looking for the person to tackle or take on in the first 6 months, first year. So there's a lot of time that goes into, talking to stakeholders, talking to people that this person would interact with, talking to the person that the candidate would report to find out, what are the key competencies and core competencies that we should be looking for. So there's a lot that goes in there. There's a lot of discussion that takes place and a lot of weighing of the decision, I'd say heavily. So there's quite a bit taken into consideration. The interview, the materials, the second round of interviews, and I think we probably get to this later, but the background check is, for us, the most important part of the process. Yeah.
So I think she hit 90% of it right there. I think I can't, and I think there's a question later, but I can't emphasize enough the value of building a network. I think it's really important. I always try to keep a short list of 5 to 10 people in my head that if I've got a position that's going to be opening up, that they'll get an email even before we post it. The last thing Marissa wants to do is a search again, and every slate of candidates that she puts forward to a potential employer is a reflection of her and her firm. And so, she's going to be more comfortable, I would think, with people that she's either, seen an interview process before, or had some experience with, or is thoroughly vetted before. So, I think a big component in behind the scenes and where you can take some steps to help yourself is to build a network, get yourself introduced to a recruiter like Marissa, so that before you're coming in completely cold, start to have built that relationship so that you've got some credibility kind of coming into the process on the front end.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Mr. Mayor. As a local elected official, what kind of employee do you want to see working for your city?
Well, first, I want to see people that really do have the passion for public service, folks that are committed to the work, engaged, have some empathy and understanding for all sides of an issue, really good communication skills. So I'm looking for people that are authentically interested in our community and communities in general.
Great, thank you. We're moving on to the next section, which is the interview section. And next question is for Marissa. What's unique about interviewing for a job in local government?
Yeah, there are some unique things, I think, and I think it goes back to local government being so engaged with the public, being such a direct service provider, being typically at smaller organizations where you're really working closely and collaborating across all different parts of the organization. So I'd say input is very important in the selection process for local government. So there tends to be a lot of people involved, whether it's on the front end and we're gathering input about, what are the main skills, qualities, abilities, and experience that we should be seeking in candidates. But there's also a lot of input usually in the interview process for local government. So typically local government likes to have multi-panels. So I think if you're interested in local government, you want to, be ready for that kind of process and look forward and kind of enthusiastic for that kind of process. It can be an all-day experience. It can be 2 days. Sometimes it involves, touring the city. Sometimes it involves meeting with the mayor and the city council. But it's important to show enthusiasm throughout that process. It can be kind of a long day or a long couple of days.
Do you have an average from inception to final hiring for jobs, or does it differ?
I'd say an average is 90 to 120 days from, the time that we take the job on and meet with the client for the first time to filling. I've had recruitments go on longer than that. That's pretty typical.
Hopefully you get paid by the hour.
If I could add to that, I think one of the most unique things is it's public, right? So if I work for the mayor here and I decided to apply for a city manager job in another city, the last thing I want my mayor to do is read about that in the newspaper, because that's, it's all out there. It all gets reported. So you need to, I need to have a conversation with my elected leaders in advance, and explain to them why I'm thinking about maybe taking another position. And the same is true dependent upon whatever position you're in. All those positions are public. I think you need to be willing to have that conversation with your current supervisor in advance of taking a job to say, these are the reasons why I'm looking at taking another job. It may be professional advancement. It may be more salary, it may be different experiences, maybe a problem within the organization that there is a push factor for looking for another job. But I think in the public sector, you got to be open with your supervisor and understand what it is and how willing they are to work with you. If they're going to be a challenge, that you've got to at least understand that when you're going to look for another job. If the mayor thought I was being disloyal or not, being upfront about why I may be looking for another position, or if I'm in the position and I'm going for my 5th interview in another city, you may be wondering, well, do you really want to be here or not? So partly dependent on what position you're in, I think, for that organization, but you just have to assume that there are no secrets. Everything is a public process in local government.
That's a great point. It's so different from the private sector. Next question is for everybody. What makes a great interview, and what interviewing tips do you have to share? Start with Stephen.
Sure. So what you do before the interview gets you in the room. Once you're in the room, you need to really be clear to everybody else why you should be there. So the interview process itself, that experience is extremely important. Of course, in many cases, it's your opportunity to make a first impression on people. Not always the case, but in many cases. So I'd say the interview is very important, but it's part of everything else. So I don't know that I would overemphasize it. And every position is a little bit different. The context is going to be different. And again, I mean, I'm actually going to back up a little bit to some of what Bob and Marissa were saying. Before the interview process, making sure that you've attended to the details of all the written materials, that you're bringing quality materials to the table in advance of the interview, that you've worked your networks, that you know a little bit of something, as much as you can possibly, about the other people that might be in the room for the interview. Do your homework in advance of what kinds of interview processes have been used in the past by the organization that you're applying for a job with. So doing your homework before you walk in, that can help boost your confidence. Once you're in the room, you need to be authentic. That's probably the most important thing. If you're not authentic, I think it shows right away. So being yourself and getting comfortable in the interview process is important. Doing lots of interviews when you're first starting out is important. Not getting discouraged is important. It's an ongoing process. And when I look back in my own career, from all the different things that I've done, I've applied for many jobs. I always went after jobs that I really wanted and cared about. And when I think back of how I worked through, in over 30 years, how I worked my way from one position to another, probably the most important part of that was relationships. Everything that we do involves relationships. So your reputation is critically important. How you work with your authorizing environment, your supervisors, and your peers, that's extremely important, and will play itself out in everything that you do in the future.
Right.
Mayor covered quite a bit of the important things. Being yourself is such an important part of the interview process. I think for me, when I'm interviewing with somebody one-on-one and versus a panel kind of a setting, there's some differences between what makes a good interview. For me, one-on-one, being able to hear the candidate provide me with really direct, concrete examples about how their experience translates to the position that they're seeking. So being able to be, pretty detailed and clear about what they do and what they've done and how it relates to the job that they're interested in is important. somebody who can be relaxed, somebody who's articulate in the interview environment, is important one-on-one. I think when you get in the panel setting, there's some things that become more challenging for the candidate, quite honestly. I mean, if any of you have ever sat in a room with, 6 or 7 or 8 or more people interviewing, that can be kind of a little bit more like theater. And so in that setting, enthusiasm is very important. Preparation, I probably can't stress that enough. I'm always shocked when great candidates arrive and they haven't prepared for the interview. So, I mean, I even would recommend writing down some thoughts about, questions that you think might come up, and definitely taking the time to research the organization that you're applying with and show genuine interest. And prove that you've done your homework. There's a lot out there in the public sector that you can take a look at before you go into an interview, and you should look at everything that you can get your hands on.
Okay. I was going to ask if you could maybe prioritize which documents we should be.
Yeah. I mean, I think you always want to look at a strategic plan. You want to look at budget documents. You want to take a good hard look at the job description and any kind of job announcement that was out there. I think it's good to look at city council minutes to see what are some of the issues that are coming up or have been coming up. Those are places I would start. Most local governments have great websites that are full of information. So.
Great, thanks.
I think the Mayor and Marissa answered that question terrifically. I mean, they hit it all. I mean, there's a few areas I would suggest. One is 90% of organizations do interviewing really poorly. So you got to assume kind of that you're going into an organization that you're going to have to be able to sell who you are, be authentic, and be able to communicate who you are, even regardless of how poorly the questions may be worded or the structure that the organization has put in place, because you want to make that personal connection with the people who are doing the interview. I think being succinct and short, you want to talk about how successful you've been in your previous job, but you got to be able to do it really compactly and shortly. I've seen a lot of candidates that will ramble on and on about an answer, and they've lost their audience during that process. I think being able to convert your past experience, which is wonderful, but you have to convert that into what is going to benefit the organization. So really be able to talk about, if the community is having this problem, how your skill set can help them solve that problem, because ultimately that's why they want to hire you. And I think lastly, and this is, I think lastly, the biggest thing is don't bring your baggage to the interview. So it's without fail, it seems like I've got one candidate who's wonderful on paper, and they've had a traumatic experience in their last organization or a horrible boss, and they come in and they're still living that experience, and whether they need counseling or they need, something else to get them past that experience. But, breaking down, I've had people break down and cry during an interview, which is really sad. And you feel empathetic for them, but is that what you want to hire into your organization? Probably not. So if you're dealing with, experiences in your current job, my advice would be to bring some personal resolution to those things so that when you are coming into an interview, you're focused on your future rather than on the past.
Great. Thank you.
I want to just build on that comment a little bit. I appreciate you mentioning that. I'm thinking back of all the experiences I've had interviewing people, and it's challenging, actually, I think, on both sides of the table. So one of the things I want to encourage folks to reflect on, when you walk into that interview experience, you can be confident that everybody else has also been in the interview experience. So there is, right away, I think it helps to just reflect a little bit. You should trust that you're dealing with human beings that have empathy and understanding. I'm actually sort of interested in what Marissa and Bob think about this next comment that I'm going to make. But when questions are asked and they aren't clear, I personally think it's okay to ask a carefully worded, clarifying question.
Yes.
Use the interview process to connect with people. So when you're in an interview process, the direct connection, the relational aspect of the interview is really important to me. I want to know if a person's just being real. If they don't understand the question, the last thing I want them to do is fake an answer. And if you are faking an answer, that'll come through. So asking clarifying questions, I think, is 100% okay. It should be okay. And actually, if it's not okay, I don't know if I want to work with it.
That's right.
So it's a two-way street. And in many cases, actually, just sort of building on that a little bit, when I think back on my own interview experiences, I mean, if you can think of it as a two-way street, this is your opportunity to get some insight into the organization that you may want to work with, or you may not want to work for. It is a two-way street. So one of the things that I always like to emphasize when we were doing interview panels is we want to treat people respectfully. We want to give them the opportunity to show their very best, and that's hopefully what you'll have an opportunity to do as you interview.
Great. I agree. Yeah, the other thing I'd add as I was sitting here listening is physical presence, I think, is important. So being able to make eye contact with the individuals who are asking you the questions, being not slouching during the interview, being comfortable with, your hand placement, how you're sitting in a chair. Are you finishing people's sentences or not? You don't want to do that. So there's a lot of that component because we're also measuring just how you're going to be interacting in a room. Are you confident in yourself or not? And that shows not just in what you're saying, but how you're physically, presenting yourself during an interview as well.
Right. Thank you.
And one other thing.
Yeah.
It occurs to me as I sit in this room staring at this Orwellian device. I wish everybody could see what we're looking at. Because we're looking at this odd sort of ET-like robot that has a lens that we're staring into. And it's a really different experience to do an interview over a telephone or over a webcam. And if that's the kind of experience that you're walking into, I would encourage practice. You need to, even when we're in this kind of situation, you need to convey some level of comfort and some, I think, in this world of new technology, when we are doing things more remotely, I think it makes sense to think about how am I going to engage with the people on the other side of this little robot lens. So I think that's worth a little bit of preparation if that's the kind of interview experience you're walking into.
Great. I think we'll be posting a picture of said robotic device onto our Twitter page. Next question is for all three panelists. How much of the decision is already made before the interview, or how important is the interview in the hiring process?
Yeah, I'll take this one because I alluded to my thoughts on this, I think, earlier. So the interview process is important, and it's definitely it's a critical piece of the selection and recruitment process for our clients. It tends to be one of the most important parts of the process because it's their first interaction typically with the candidates, and it's usually involvement with a number of people from the organization. The most important part of the recruitment process for me, though, is the background check. Because truly the best indicator of future performance is past performance. So having good relationships with peers, with stakeholders, with former supervisors, current supervisors, with people who have reported to you, and beyond your references. And so I'd say, letters of recommendation are pretty outdated in the recruiting world. Even providing your references, in the first look is fairly outdated. We're really not interested in talking to your references until later in the process, truly because we know kind of what they're going to say. So for us, we go much deeper than the references. We're going to talk to, people who have worked for you, people who have worked alongside you, people who have been your customers, people who you've reported to really try to get a complete picture. And what we want to see is consistency. So if you're telling us something in the preliminary interview, and then as a candidate, you're talking to the panel about certain experiences and conveying yourself in a particular way, but then we hear a completely different picture from the people that we're talking to about you, then that's kind of a red flag to organizations. So the background's really important and sometimes overlooked, I think, is
very interesting.
Even the references you do list, you better make sure that there's, they're going to give you a good reference, because sometimes they don't. So yeah, that's really important. And you also have to assume that you will live. You are going to have to explain your social media profile at some point. So you go into a job and it's not just HR anymore. It's doing anybody can do a background check on you. So if you've got your cookout at the Seahawks game and you're all getting wild and you're wearing a 6 beer with a straw hat on your head, you got to, and you're applying for a department director position, you might have to explain that while you're in the interview. Is that the type of responsible, image that you want to show to the community that you have? So, taking a look even before you start at your social media profile and your presence and what you put out there about yourself, it's part of your image, and so you have to be cognizant that you want to present a good image of yourself within that context. And there's nothing hidden anymore. You can find it, you can find just about anything. And if you do have situations, which everybody does, you can't hide. You have to have an explanation as to why, or what occurred, or whatever the situation may be, so that. If you don't want to end up in a situation where you're in an interview and you don't have an answer for something that you've done in the past.
Right. I agree with everything that Bob and Marissa said. I guess the only thing I might add is, people can be forgiving though too.
Absolutely.
And over time, I think it's anymore, we can expect to be going through several major job searches before we're in retirement mode. So people will go from almost one career area to another career area, and actually I think that speaks to the kind of dynamic change that we're going through, both in terms of government and socially, and in the private sector for that matter. So if you get fired from a job, if you've lost a job, just being clear what happened, and trying to do that work where you're not in a regretful or a grieving place. You're in a place where you can reflectively say what happened from your perspective and what you learned from it, and again, tap into that genuine authenticity of what you're looking to do at this point.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Mayor, because I think an important thing, if you've got something in your background or work experience that I might likely to be able to read on the internet, is that you bring it up and that you're honest about it. So sometimes I'll wait till the end of the interview just to see if the candidate will actually bring up an issue that has, been in the paper or on a blog, or, if you need to be aware of things that are out there that have been written about you, if you've been in, and if you've been in any local government setting in a management role, likely there are going to be things on the internet that are both positive and negative about you. But it's good to be aware of those things, and then to be really forthcoming and honest about the situation. And that's the best way to approach anything that might be perceived as negative in your background.
Great. Thank you all. We'll move on to the next section, which is networking, and this is for Stephen and Bob. How do you meet people in the local government sector? We talked about how important our network is. How do we meet people, and what would you recommend for someone starting out?
I'm happy to give a first shot to that. So networks are important. Holding on to your networks is what's really important. If you've gone through, as most people entering public service at this point, have gone through some kind of undergraduate program at the very least, or a master's program. Those relationships that you develop in that phase of your life, typically those are the relationships that are going to help you throughout your life. So if you're in a graduate program at the moment, or you're in an undergraduate program at the moment, start thinking right now about how you're going to make good use of those relationships. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be with people that are directly in the field that you're interested in. Friends and networks are great resources to use when you're just putting together your professional package, your resume, and you're getting another set of friendly eyes to look over your work before you pass it on to somebody else. That's a great resource, and is part of using your network effectively. Listening to what your friends and associates say about you. I wouldn't necessarily recommend just surprising people in a bar over a glass of wine saying, "What do you think I should really do with my life?" That's probably not the way you want to approach them, but you might consider working with your friends and associates and say, "I'd like you to, if you would, just take a little bit of time over the next couple of days and reflect about what you think I would be really good at doing, or what you think my skill sets are that are the best things that I have going for me." Get that feedback from your friends and associates. That's one way to use your network that I think is going to help you succeed in a job search over time, and also build your self-awareness and understanding about how other people perceive you, which is an important thing to understand as you go forward into leadership positions. And then, of course, the professional associations, signing up for working with organizations like the Association of Washington Cities, doing volunteer work, attending meetings. Go to advisory committee meetings if you're interested in working for city government, and listen to what the Arts and Recreation Advisory Committee is talking about. Get to know some of the people that are advisory committee members. Listen to what they think about the issues and interests that they're exploring. So volunteer. And volunteer in a bunch of different things, not necessarily one thing. Make sure, of course, that you're true to yourself in terms of following the things that you're most interested in and passionate about. But getting some variety is also a good thing.
I think the mayor hit on most of those. I think professional associations are areas I can start with and look at for peer positions. But the other thing is I serve on a lot of regional committees, task forces, organizations, just part of my job. And at AWC, I go and you're meeting people from across the state. And in that setting is really important, because now I'm not just meeting my peers and colleagues, but I'm meeting individuals that have depth within the organization. So I might meet an assistant recreation director in one of those regional committees, or one of their staff members. So, attending those things, and then when you do attend, being an active participant, your actions in those meetings are the impression that I'm getting about you as an individual before I've even, thought about a job that might be opening up 3 or 4 years from now. The other thing is, I've had people that have just called me up and said, "Hey, can you meet? And I'm thinking about getting into city management. I'm a planner right now. And can you spend an hour with me to just talk about my career and where I'm at?" And they've brought their resume with them, and I've sat and had the opportunity to have a chat with them about it and some areas that they may need to strengthen their resume. And I had one individual just about 3 months ago who called up my assistant and said, "Would you mind if I job shadowed Bob for the day?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm sure he'd love it." And so I showed up for work that morning. It was about 8:30, and there's this young person sitting there, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right. She's job shadowing me today." And I'm like, it's going to be a long day for her and me. But we had a wonderful time, and I can't tell you how exciting it was to get to, a perspective from a person from outside the organization who's younger and interested in the job, and what needs to be done. And she was able to meet the city manager and the mayor of 5 different municipalities when she attended a meeting with me later that day, which she never would have had if she hadn't made that cold call and said, hey, would you be willing to spend the day, together as part of your organization? So,
Great.
good return.
I think you covered it.
Yeah, just one other aspect to that, I guess. Sometimes it can be really tough to figure out how to make those connections. And although I also advocate what Bob is saying, and seeking out opportunities to job shadow or informational interviews, that stuff I think is important. It doesn't always work. Yes. So you have to understand that if everybody was wanting a job within ISQA executive department called Bob up for opportunity to shadow, he might get a little bit overtapped there. But I think the role of local clubs and organizations has been sort of de-emphasized recently. But I want to encourage people to not forget about organizations like Rotary or Chambers of Commerce, or that is another place where you can meet folks that are in executive management in government, and it can be a little bit less intimidating to connect with people in those kinds of settings. So don't forget about clubs and professional organizations like that as well.
Great, thank you. And finally, we will finish up with some Q&A. And we have one question, and I'll read it out loud. Bill Harrison spoke about developing relationships with potential employers of interest before applying. Can you, Mr. Harrison, provide some ideas of how one might do this?
I think we just did. So I think it's doing those reach outs, making connections. It may not even be with me. It may be other individuals in the organization, right? So that if you're someone interested in recreation, get to know people in our recreation department. So when we're out, looking for a job, there's a reference point so that I have, a connection to someone in rec that could say, hey, here's somebody you ought to look at, forward on their resume.
Great. So once again, I'll reiterate how to actually ask a question. There's a Q&A button at the top of your screen to open the Q&A panel. You can ask a question, one question at a time, or press the edit button to add on to your question. And so we'll wait. Maybe we'll get some more. And until then, I will ask one final question. What's your best advice for someone looking for a job in local government? Anybody can answer.
Well, what I would say is, and I'd love to hear your answer. I think the pool of candidates for jobs has gotten very narrow. I think there are tremendous opportunities for people to get into local government, even with less experience. A lot of the baby boomers are retiring. Thousands of baby boomers are retiring a day in their positions. We're getting jobs for senior level to mid-level that maybe we're getting 50 resumes for. And of that, I feel good about bringing in maybe 6 to 10. Some of them have never worked in the field before, or they have messed up on their cover letter and resume. So I don't short sell yourself when you're looking at a job, even though you might be a little less experienced. Get to know people like Marissa. On the outside, when I started out as a management intern, I saw who the recruiting firms were in the Midwest, and I took every opportunity going to those state association meetings or giving them a call and getting to know who they were, so they knew who I was even before I applied for a job. So I think those are the kind of the key points.
I think the perception is that there are less jobs and that the pools are large, but I would agree with you. In fact, for leadership and management jobs, we're seeing, and since the Great Recession, that really the pools have shrunk for those positions, and in particular we see much fewer candidates that are applying from outside the area, because most executives own homes and it's difficult to sell your home, even still and make a move across the country. So the pool for leadership and management jobs have shrunk, and we oftentimes have to look, far and wide for quality candidates.
Yeah, I think if you're in public works, we're getting 200 applicants for a job like that for a person who may be, running a backhoe or something. But you get into those management jobs, and they're pretty thin. So I think you've got the opportunity to compete pretty well for, positions in that area.
Okay. And if you're interested in local governance, if you're interested in working for a local government, get involved, get engaged. It makes a difference if you are seen as an active participant, going to meetings, and thoughtfully engaging with others about issues and interests that are important, and do skill building. I think thinking about, if you're interested in a particular field, then you want to stay on top of what's happening in that field. But there are other basic skills. Learning a skill like mediation, getting involved in a local conflict resolution organization. While you're doing your job search, or as you're researching a potential career change, pick up some additional skills along the way, and things that will serve you well in the long term. And certainly learning mediation is one of those.
Great. And we've since gotten a few more questions. So we'll start with one regarding geography. How does someone overcome a geographic limitation? For instance, this person is asking specifically for jobs. They're applying for jobs in the Northwest, and yet they're not here.
Yeah. Well, for us, I can't think of the last time I did a telephone interview. So definitely being up to speed on using technology. So if I have a candidate that I'm interested in interviewing, I'm going to Skype with them. And if you haven't used Skype before, you should learn how to use it, because I think a lot of organizations are using Skype or other video conferencing technology to interview candidates, because that face-to-face interaction is possible with technology. So, I think that's one way to interact with the employer. I think if you're selected to interview, a lot of local governments can't afford to bring candidates from outside the area until they're down to finalists. So I've even seen candidates be willing to bring themselves out for an interview. So, that's not always possible, but just taking the initiative to kind of appear in person if you can, and know how to use technology.
Yeah, we just hired our new deputy administrator from Windsor, Connecticut. So I think you can overcome it. It depends on the size of the city and their budget. So, coming back to my background, I interned for a city of 15,000, was an assistant in a city of 50,000, and then went and worked as my first administrator job in the city of 4,000. Those smaller cities are real opportunities for individuals to kind of cut their teeth, but you have to be willing to relocate, maybe to a rural area or, someplace more remote to do that. And you pay your dues for those 2 or 3 years, and then you have the opportunity to move on to your own city. But you're going to have to maybe, pay your own travel expenses or stuff, because those cities just don't have that type of budget. But I think you can overcome that. And as Marissa said, the first time that you want to, you don't want to be in an interview for the first time that you've used Skype. I've seen too many fails where that happened, and in 5 minutes or 10 minutes you just said, well, this isn't working out, and you lost your opportunity.
Yeah, and then maybe a spin on that answer too, because I'm not sure if maybe the question may have been in the context of knowing the region. And so if you're an outsider, sometimes you're not familiar with the area, with the way things that work in the state, or in the local government that you're applying for. But I would say that if you bring other things, you can overcome that. So I'm just going to give a quick example. We did a search for the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency for their executive director. We first met with the board. They said that they needed someone who was from inside the state, knew the congressional delegation, knew the legislature, and they had 7 or 8 candidates that they interviewed, and many of them had those kinds of experiences, and they ended up selecting somebody from Wyoming because he brought other things to the position. So if you're not from the area, you're not necessarily intimately familiar with the region or the city or the county that you're interested in working for, there are things that you can bring to the interview process and the application process that can overcome that.
And frankly, I've known a few people. It depends on how vested you are. If you own a house and you got 4 kids, and you may not just be able to pack up and move. But I know a lot of young professionals that they moved to Seattle. I've interviewed a few of them. Moved to Seattle and said, "I'll find a job when I get there." But they made the commitment to come here first, and it was easier to bring them in for entry level positions. So it might be something to consider.
Right. And I wasn't sure how. From how the question was raised. If the primary interest is making a geographical decision, pursuing, trying to figure out how to make the jump to the Pacific Northwest because of quality of life considerations, or this is just where you want to live, it might be that you have to do it incrementally. If you can't afford to just move here and look for work, like Bob was suggesting, people making those just decisions to come here and find whatever they can. It might be a matter of finding a bridge position. It might not be your first choice, but getting relocated in some area, and then once you're here pursuing your dream job. I think it's just a matter about being clear what your priority is.
Great, thank you. Our next question regards hiring time frames. So earlier we talked about that an average time frame is 90 to 100 days. What is the comparison to the private sector? Do we feel that this is an acceptable time frame, and should we be attempting to shorten this time frame?
That's a good question. Not all of our clients in the public sector take that long to do recruitments. In fact, I have local government clients that come to us and say, "Bring us 3 candidates. We're going to interview the 3 candidates and pick a person." When we did the transition for Governor Inslee, we were filling agency director positions in 2 weeks. So it depends on the needs of the organization, but I would say we're seeing more and more public sector organizations, especially if they have a developed and trusted relationship with us. They've maybe worked with us on past searches, say to us, "Bring us 3 candidates who are qualified. We're going to interview them, and we're going to pick a person," and they're doing it in 30 days. So yes, it's a longer process in the private sector, the 90 to 120 days, but that's really an industry standard. I think there's more process in the public sector typically than in the private sector, but the time frame that's actually standard for the industry.
Great. All right, and we have one final question. Is there an appropriate amount of time to remain in the job before searching to move on?
So if you're a member of ICMA, International City County Management Association, we have a code of ethics, and the code of ethics requires you to stay in a job for 2 years. So if you don't, you actually could have an ethical charge brought against you and receive a censure for that. I think employers spend a lot of money. If I hire someone like Marissa, it's going to cost me $25,000 to $35,000. She's looking up and telling me it's going to cost me a lot of money. So that's an investment. And then there's investment in training, and if I move you and stuff. So you do owe it to your employer to stay for a period of time. I would suggest, I'd like to see 5 years out of a person. I know for some positions that's not realistic. But 2 to 3 years ought to be a minimum. I think that you're coming into a job to say, I'll make that commitment.
Yeah, I think definitely, we like to see less job changes on resumes, but I will say that the younger generation is much more comfortable with changing jobs more frequently. So whereas my parents' generation and I would say even my generation, spent quite a bit of time, full careers, 10, 20 years with the same organization, we're seeing that the generation that's coming up feels like they become stale if they stay too long in an organization. So especially in the private sector, you're seeing that people do change jobs more frequently. So we just take a careful look at people's background, I would say.
And I think it depends on where you are in your career. So my first jobs were 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, and then 12 years. So I think you are, as you're working up the career ladder, you're going to be maybe shorter stays if you're younger in your career. But I do think you want to see some level of commitment for some period of time that you're not just going to turn over within a 2 or 3 year period.
Great. We have 2 more questions that are essentially the same, and they want to know about social networking, jobs, social network sites. So LinkedIn, or are there any sites specifically that our job seekers should be using?
I think LinkedIn is a great site for having a presence. I would say you don't want to overuse or overly rely on social networking. I think the personal interaction is still very important. And I just be careful about the kind of networking that you do to organizations. By reaching out blindly to elected officials on social media is probably not the best idea. So I think it's good to use contacts when you have a relationship with them, and they trust you, and they know you if you're trying to gain some kind of influence in the process. But you want to kind of walk that line carefully, I think.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned what you did, Marissa, about reaching out to local electeds. It's been interesting in my life, transitioning from being an executive manager to being a local elected. As a local elected, social media is just pretty much off limits for me. It's very hard to participate in social media of any kind as a local elected, for the most part because of public disclosure rules, the Open Public Meeting Act. There's all kinds of different things that make it very difficult for me to participate directly in social media. So LinkedIn can be a great resource. I don't participate in LinkedIn, primarily because of the position that I hold. So don't get offended if you don't get a response from me or other local elected officials on some forms of social media, just simply because of our transparency rules and laws. It makes it very, very challenging. And I think we're all, at least I am, still learning about social media, still trying to figure it out. The brave new world of social media is something that I think we're all trying to figure out how to understand and navigate.
I think, so I do use LinkedIn. We don't do much recruiting on it, but I think it's mainly if I get, 4 or 5 applicants that's been screened by our HR department, they brought it through. I may do a LinkedIn search to see where they are, what their experience is, and then who their network is. So, if I see that they're a second connection or a first connection to someone who's a connection to mine, I may have a conversation with that individual before I go into the interview to kind of get some, their contact to see who that is. So again, it's, connecting with the network and then being able to have someone who can speak intelligently about you. If you're just blindly connecting with people on LinkedIn, it's not going to do you any good. I saw another question up there about posting sites, and I don't think you can ever, Monster, but if people, do you hire off of Monster?
No, we don't advertise.
Yeah, there's no, I would say you can't be static if you're looking for a job. You got to be proactive in getting out, trying to get your resume out in front of people and get hired. There is no special place to just go post your website where people are going to find you.
Great. It looks like we have no other questions. So to summarize, it seems that we need to be well prepared and have a demonstrated passion for public service. We need our social skills, our technical skills, a strong network, and above all, a resilient attitude. So I would like to thank our co-hosts, the ELGL, Merging Local Government Leaders, the AWC, the Association of Washington Cities, Mayor Bucksbaum from Olympia, Bob Harrison from Issaquah, and Marissa Karras from Karras Consulting. And I've been your moderator, Logan Barr. I'd like to thank all of you for participating today.